Welcome back to Creating Your Genius or Creating Genius. Honestly, I kind of forget which one it is sometimes. But anyways, it's been a couple weeks. I've been doing some traveling and I've had some just amazing experiences. Just a lot of healing, connection, so much growth and insight. And it's really given me a whole new direction. And, I hope that's reflected in the content that I put out going forward. And I'm really excited to dive into all of this. So let's do it. When looking at spiritual concepts, there's almost always a correlation to the scientific. One of my favorite quotes about science, and specifically this relationship between science and spirituality, comes from Dr. Joe Dispenza, who is doing some amazing work quantifying a lot of things that we thought were completely unquantifiable before. He's looking at people in meditative states and measuring their brain waves using EEGs, and he's measuring what happens in their blood when they go to an event and meditate intensely for 7 days, and seeing real changes in the types of biomarkers that we're expressing. I mean, this stuff it really is groundbreaking, and he's an inspiration for sure. The quote that I want to say from him is that science is the language we use to demystify the mystical. And that really is exactly what we do in science. We take concepts that don't seem to have an answer, and we try to answer them. And the mystical that Dr. Joe refers to is the unknown. To put in different words, science is the language of making the unknown known. I think that's so powerful because there's so many things that happen beyond our awareness and in our world that we just have no idea why. There's so many things that there's no explanation. And science really has always been the asking of questions and creating hypotheses to figure out a little bit more about this unknown. And that's not to say that we're ever going to fully figure it out, and we aren't. And that's part of the beauty of being here, experiencing the world in this way, is that there's always more to learn, and there's always more information that we can gather and be exposed to, and more experiences that we can have. And it's, in my opinion, it's really hopeful and it's amazing. I want to take that concept of taking the unknown and making it more known, and I want to reverse engineer that a little bit. I want to take a spiritual concept that can be looked at as sort of not exactly scientific and put some of the science behind it to make it, make a little more sense. So that concept is chakras, or what Dr. Joe calls energy centers, and I like that better. In Hinduism and Buddhism, there's a mention of somewhere between 5 and 8 chakras, and each has a specific energetic meaning in terms of how we relate to the world. The Western society and cultures here in America and whatnot have taken the word of chakras and created many meanings about it. Some are rooted in reality, and some are not quite as rooted in reality. And again, that's one of the reasons why I like energy centers better, is because it doesn't carry that same stigma as chakras does. The main point here is that there really is a scientific reason for why these specific areas in the body, the chakras or the energy centers, are given higher regard. And part of that goes back to nerves, that nerves are one of the most electrically active parts of our body, especially in our brain, where we move massive quantities of positive charges into neurons to send signals all throughout the body. That is true for these other clusters of nerves. The brain is the biggest cluster of nerves, but we have clusters of nerves that kind of run all throughout our body, and there are places where they become more dense. And when there's more density of neurons, these parts of the body are more active. So because these centers have nerves, and they're larger clusters than, let's say, a point in my elbow, when these nerves are all active in coherent ways or orderly ways, They have minds of their own. And when we express each of them, we are informing them, or they are being informed by certain frequencies that creates the expression. Let's tease that out a little bit. There's this idea that our bodies emit these fields of light. But I think the truth of the matter is actually that there are fields of light that slow down enough to emit our bodies. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but one of the ways I like to think about this is in terms of the fact that in chemical equations, energy always flows from the highest energy state to the lowest. And so if we know that light has more energy than matter, it would have to be that light is informing matter, and as light slows down, it basically tells the matter how to express itself. So when working with this, we are accepting that the energy, light, or frequency is actually what creates our bodies, and not that our body is emitting a certain energy or light pattern. An example of this, I think this is a really good one, is when we get sexually aroused. It's that we tune into the frequency of sexual energy, and there are an unlimited amount of frequencies that exist out there, and we can't really quantify them. And we can think about these frequencies as they're like radio waves. So when you tune on a radio, you change the channel to tune into the rock station or the pop station or whatever station you want, and your car or the radio receiver in your car or at your house or wherever you have the radio. I'm realizing that this is kind of an outdated analogy. That's okay. You tune into the specific channel that picks up the frequency or the radio waves that are being sent, and you get that radio station. That's basically what's happening in our bodies all the time. When you have thoughts, you're tuning into specific frequencies in the field, and the tuning into those frequencies causes your physical body to express those kind of the matter version of those frequencies. So for the sexual example, we tune into the frequency of sexual energy, and then it organizes itself in the physical manifestation of arousal. The frequency is tapped into, and this leads to matter organizing itself in a way that reflects that frequency. When you feel the fantasy, you tune into that energy, and then your body ends up reflecting that, and it reflects that in the sensations that get activated in your sexual organs. And I think we can all, relate to that. To kind of take that out a little bit, apply it to a more general concept. When we tune into the energies, frequencies, and we live in ways that align these chakras or energy centers, we activate their minds. And their minds are able to allow us to express ourselves in the highest ways, because we're not consciously digesting our food. I don't eat something and I'm like, okay, digestive system, time to do your job. And I'm not controlling that entire process. You would have to think that there's a brain in there via the cluster of nerves that's acting in its own best interest. Well, in our best interest, but it's not conscious. And so it has, I would think that would mean that it has a mind of its own. When we express ourselves, we subconsciously activate these different centers, and we cause their minds to turn on, and then they express themselves based on the frequencies that we're tuning into. And again, this is an unconscious process. When we live in alignment, they're going to express themselves to the greatest good. But when they're out of alignment, or we're out of alignment, or tuning into frequencies that cause them to become out of balance, it gets reflected in our physical bodies. And this could be something like slight discomfort, and it could be something as serious as full-blown disease states. What exactly are these centers? Where are they located? What do they do? How do they help us relate to the world? So I'm going to work kind of down to up. We have 8 of them, and each of them rules a different aspect of our spiritual and physical lives. Our first energy center is located it's our perineum, it's our sexual organs, our pelvis, but also encompasses our legs. And this is going to be our connection to the earth. It's going to be our passion. This is where creative energy comes from, because sex is the act of creating life, and that the release of that sexual energy to create a baby happens in that first center. It's also important for the release of toxins, which happens when we go to the bathroom. And again, it's like, this is how we connect to the earth. This is sort of our most primal, our most grounded and rooted version of ourself is when this center is being activated. Moving up, our second center is kind of behind and below our belly button. And the main organ here is going to be our intestines, both small and large. This center is where we take in nutrients and break them down and assimilate them into our bodies. But this is the center for trust. And this is where the term trusting your gut comes from. And it would make sense then that our guts have their own nervous system called the ENS, or enteric nervous system, and this contains a massive amount of neurons. An important part of our intestinal function comes from our microbiome, and the microbiome are going to be a very important part of this center. I love the fact that this center encompasses our microbiome because this is the center for trust and safety. It would make sense that we are creating a safe environment for our microbiome, all these bacteria that are alive, to live within us. And when we create that safe environment for them, they help us express ourselves to our greatest good. This is the rest and digest part of our parasympathetic nervous system. When this center is out of balance, it comes from when we're not feeling safe. And a big part of this is why we as humans search for social connection. We're tribal beings. One human isolated alone in the wild, in nature, back before we had the society that we did, might not survive that well. If you go up against a bear or a lion or some sort of predator, one-on-one, you versus a lion, not great. But a whole group of humans with the capacity to make tools and protect each other and look out for each other and is going to fare much better. We are driven by this center to have social connections, to have ties, to have a community that'll protect us. When the center's out of alignment, it's because we don't feel safe. And when we don't feel safe, we're not able to digest our food. If we think about stress and how when you're in stress, that digestive process is downregulated. You make less stomach acid. You make chemicals that disrupt your microbiome and gut bacteria. The center is all about safety. When it's out of balance, we can have digestive issues and our microbiome can become less healthy. Again, trust and safety are kind of the big keys here. Our third center is the center of will and power. This center is located between your belly button and diaphragm. This is where our ego comes from. The center rules how we show up in the world and how we navigate the 3D challenges that we all face. There are many, many organs involved in this center. I'll mention just a few. It's the stomach, gallbladder, spleen, liver, pancreas, adrenals, and musculoskeletal system. The center is heavily involved in utilizing energy for our bodies. The liver stores carbohydrates as glycogen that we can break down when we aren't able to eat enough food. It also creates ketones from fats, which our brains and bodies use for energy. The gallbladder makes bile, which is important for our ability to break down fats. The spleen filters our blood, and the musculoskeletal system literally moves us throughout the world, using, regulating, and storing energy as it does that. So this center is very connected to how we show up in the 3D world and how we perceive threats. Our ego, our sense of self is all going to come from that third center. It's the fire in your belly. It's that will. When the center's out of balance, particularly the adrenal gland becomes overactivated. And this is when, you have excess cortisol, you can't relax, trying to control. That is an overactivation of the third center to the highest degree, is trying to control the environment. When it goes too far, we can become fatigued. Our hormones can become very out of balance because the adrenals are such an important part of hormone production and regulation. All right, moving up. This is kind of where we get into more sort of spiritual and less connected to the 3D world. The fourth center is our heart. It's located right behind your breastbone, and it's the center of love. It has our heart, our lungs, ribs, and diaphragm. It breathes life into our bodies and souls. And the heart itself is actually a very electrically active organ. It creates an electromagnetic field of about 4 feet around us. It extends out 4 feet in every single direction. Beyond connection and love, this center is also about exchange. Our lungs are always taking part in the exchange of gases like carbon dioxide and oxygen. We breathe oxygen in, and when we breathe out, we breathe carbon dioxide out, and we shuttle oxygen throughout all our bodies to feed our tissues, to allow us to move, to allow us to exist. And emotionally, we're also always in the process of integrating new information, new love, new experiences, new emotions. We're taking those in as we exist. And the process of the exchanging of emotions takes place in the heart. That's why when we experience trauma that we don't let go of, it gets stored in the heart, and that's where the expression "a heavy heart" comes from. When things happen to us and we hold on to those emotions and we don't exchange them and we don't let things that don't serve us kind of die off and release them, we literally store them in our heart and make it heavy. It's like carrying around a weight vest, but in your heart. When the center is in alignment, we flow through life in a loving way, while also allowing the things that no longer serve us to leave, and we love those things as they leave. Our fifth center is located in our throat, but it also encompasses the elbows, shoulders, and arms. This is the center that rules truth and also expresses love. One of my favorite things about this center, and especially in terms of expressing love, is that we use our arms to embrace each other and physically bring our hearts closer together when we hug each other. That's such a beautiful, thought of how this center is expressed in the physical world, because it's like, oh yeah, you can say I love you, and words are very, very important. I'm not belittling that, but there's something about using the parts of the fifth center to literally bring each other closer to each other, which I think is it's beautiful. This center contains the thyroid gland, which is important for energy, and the tonsils as well, which is important for our immune system. This center allows us to create in the physical world with our words, but also in the form of art, music, and movement like sports, which are all things that are heavily involved with the arms. The arms seem to be a very important way that we interface with our world, and an important way of how we create. I think this is pretty obvious, but telling the truth is so important for the health of this center. But not just saying things that are true, but also expressing ourselves in the most authentic way. Authenticity vibrates with one of the highest frequencies possible, and giving our gifts to the world is one of the ways that we express ourselves authentically. Our fifth center allows us to express that authenticity. When the center is out of balance, things like allergies and throat inflammation can occur. I think there's something really important in the fifth center about rejecting and accepting our environment. So when we try to reject our environment and fight against it, this center becomes out of alignment. Notice how when you want to tell someone off, or you get really pissed at them and you're getting ready to fight, your throat kind of clenches up and your voice changes. And in the same way, when your body reacts to something in the environment that it is rejecting, like in an allergy, it can become so severe that your throat literally closes up because of the inflammation. This center, it's going to be all about authenticity and truth and acceptance. The sixth center is located in the back of the brain. The most important parts are going to be the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and pineal gland. These glands are very important for creating chemistry. This center is called our third eye, and it becomes most active when we tune into frequencies and dimensions different than the 3D world. I think a really good example of this is when we dream. We don't really know exactly what happens or why we dream, but I think we can all agree that we're definitely tuning into things that are not of this dimension while we're dreaming. Especially talking about things like lucid dreaming or psychedelics, and psychedelics often mimic chemicals that are created from the pineal gland. That gland is really powerful in connecting us to things beyond this 3D world. The hypothalamus, pituitary, and pineal gland all synthesize hormones that regulate our nervous system. The pineal gland makes melatonin and serotonin, And the pituitary gland makes hormones that activate our adrenal gland, activate our thyroid, and have really important downstream effects in the body. Because of this, our sixth and third centers are intimately connected. And I think the reason for this is because our third eye, or sixth center, is the center of the unknown. It's all about the mystical. It's all about tuning into things that we don't know and allowing them to fill us with whatever they have in store for us. And our third center is all about controlling and will and overcoming. And so literally when we activate that third center and the adrenal gland, or when we tune into frequencies that cause stress and want us to control our environment, we take energy from the sixth center and we turn it into chemistry. And the main hormone of this is something called ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. This hormone then goes down and tells the adrenal glands that it's time to make cortisol and it's time to fight, it's time to run, it's time to control the environment. We're literally drawing energy out of our third eye when that third center becomes too active. It blunts our ability to lean into the unknown, and it downregulates the pineal gland. Beyond just serotonin and melatonin, the pineal gland can take the amino acid tryptophan and do some pretty wild things with it. It can create molecules like benzodiazepine, which is like the master relaxing molecule, or NN-dimethylph-methoxytryptamine, DMT, which has psychoactive effects in the brains. And when we dream, one of the reasons why we dream is because we create more DMT. When this center is aligned, we thrive in the unknown, and we use our intuition to guide us through our lives. Moving up from the sixth center into the seventh, our seventh center is going to be the crown of our head. It is the frontal lobe and the prefrontal cortex. This center is our connection to divinity. There's a reason why in the past, or I guess still now, I don't really know how do we really do crowns anymore? I guess not. So in the past, that's why royalty, I think, wore crowns on their heads as opposed to like as a belt or like on their feet. Although I do think a crown belt would be pretty cool, and maybe that's a more applicable way to express that royalty nowadays. But there's a reason why the seventh center is that royalty. It is divine. This center is very energetically dense, but it's also very prone to becoming underactive. And the reason for this is the highest density of cortisol receptors in our bodies are located in our frontal cortex. That means the center is very sensitive to stress. So just like the sixth center, when we are in stress, we create cortisol. The cortisol binds to the receptors in this center, and we're telling it we don't need divine intervention. We don't need information from the cosmos. We need to be connected to this 3D reality and fight off the threats or whatever is happening right in front of us. We need to be connected down here. We don't need to be allowing information to come in through that center. But when the center is aligned, we use our innate intelligence for the greatest good. We're able to channel things and create in ways that we can't fully explain. When we're in flow states, the center is just working like it's supposed to. Because when you're in flow, you're not actively thinking about what you're creating or what you're doing. You're just kind of letting it happen. And that's why the best results come from that. Because you really are just allowing information to come in from wherever it comes from, whether it's source or the cosmos or God or, whatever word you want to use. But you're not consciously doing it. No matter how badly you want to believe that it's like, I am the one that's creating this. It's not really. You're the vessel. I'm the vessel. We're all the vessels. But we are not the ones who are doing it when we're in flow. We're allowing energy and frequency that is much greater than us to be channeled through us and create. And so I think that's why flow is such a beautiful thing, and that's why we can create things that otherwise we wouldn't be able to. Anyways, moving on, our eighth center is the only one that is not located in our bodies. Technically, the location is above our head, maybe 12 to 18 inches, but it really signifies our entire energy field. It's the aura that we project into the world. This center becomes aligned when the other 7 centers are working in harmony. But I believe that it's especially impacted by the heart because of the way the heart emits that 4-foot electromagnetic field. One of the things that Dr. Joe Dispenza says often is once you get that energy from those first 3 centers into the heart, it goes straight into the brain. And I think, part of that has to do with the heart's electromagnetic field. So when you're able to pull the energy in there and the heart gets really coherent and really orderly, and you're just operating in love, your field gets really powerful. And when your field gets really powerful, it sort of signals to 8, all right, we're in alignment, let's do this. And so it kind of just allows 5, 6, and 7 to fall into place. And so I think, 4 and 8 are very intimately connected. And 8 is the embodiment of the unknown. It's not even in our body. I can't even tell you the organs or whatever is part of it because it's so unknown. And so it's fully surrendering and allowing it to be. So we've gone over the centers, a bit about what goes on with them. So why is this important? And what does this have to do with what the premise of my podcast has been up till this point, which is gene expression? So let's go back to how frequency and energy informs matter, and the idea that when we tune into different frequencies with our minds, things happen in our bodies. Another great example of this is when a coworker stresses you out. Let's say that person triggers you, and you think some sort of thought like, God, Janet is so annoying. I can't believe she's complaining about the fact that they didn't have decaf coffee at our cafeteria. I don't know. Something like that. When you think that thought, you might even feel yourself like tighten up physically, like you're getting ready to fight. That thought, it activates the HPA axis in your brain because you're tuning into that frequency of frustration. And that information as frustration comes in and it tells your pineal gland, pituitary gland, and hypothalamus, okay, we need to get ready for a fight. Janet's pissing us off. We might have to punch her in the face. When you think that thought, it activates the HPA axis in your brain, which activates genes to produce ACTH. So let's think of the genes as basically the messengers that take the information as frequency and turn it into chemistry. The frequency informs the genes to turn it into chemistry. And so you're activating the genes to produce ACTH, and that hormone travels down to the adrenal glands, causing more gene expression to make cortisol and adrenaline and prepare your body to fight Janet to the death, I think. And in that millisecond of when you think the thought and your body almost instantaneously reacts, there's a lot of gene expression that happens. The thoughts that we think, the ways that we express ourselves is absolutely going to rule which genes are being activated. And the thing about this situation at work is if you didn't care about what Janet did, it wouldn't activate the same genes. You wouldn't get pissed off. The signal wouldn't come into your HPA axis to say, I need to turn on the adrenal glands and make cortisol. So the body is choosing to activate certain genes, but at the same time, it's choosing not to activate other genes. I love this idea because it applies to our lives so much. Whenever we choose to bring our potential into matter by making a certain choice, we are at the same time choosing to not bring every other potential into matter at that very moment. Anytime a choice is made, it is also the choice not to do something else. And your gene expression works in almost the exact same way. Sometimes it actually works almost like a 2 halves of the same coin thing, where it's like if you get heads, if you turn on these genes, it downregulates other genes. But when you activate the stress response by thinking about stabbing Janet, your body is choosing not to activate the rest and digest genes. It is also making the conscious choice to make cortisol. And when your body makes cortisol, that is the conscious choice to say, it's going to affect my prefrontal cortex, it's going to affect my ability to learn and grow, and it's going to literally strip amino acids from my muscles and brains to make energy out of them so that I can deal with this threat. So every choice you and your body makes involves some sort of sacrifice. Sometimes it's as simple as not having something happen, but sometimes it's as complex as I'm literally going to break my brain down because I am prioritizing what's happening in this moment in the 3D world and the threat that I'm perceiving. So to bring this lens into even more focus, there are certain genetic pathways that govern states of inflammation, certain genes that we know convert the raw materials we gather from nature into energy. There are other genes that are involved in turning tryptophan into different metabolites beyond the mystical ones, even though those are definitely the most fun. So my revamped vision for this podcast is to really dive into how exactly specific genes, health hacks, and lifestyle choices impact the way we express ourselves spiritually. Because how we express ourselves spiritually, the way we activate our energy centers, how aligned they are, is absolutely going to impact how our genes are expressed and is going to lead to how healthy we are. At the same time, I believe this is a two-way street. There are definitely habits, supplements, and genes that we can activate in different ways that are going to impact each of our energy centers differently. And we can use the 3D expression of matter to enhance our spiritual practice, just as we can use our spiritual practice to enhance how we express ourselves as 3D matter. When we enhance our spiritual practice and we align ourselves, just like I was talking about with that seventh center, it connects us more fully to whatever you want to call that energy, whether it's God, source, the universe, the cosmos. That's our life force. That is what breathes us into us. Doing things to become more connected to that is, in my opinion, one of the best ways that we can express ourselves in a higher way, a more full way, a more whole way. And that's the vision here. It's to figure out what we can do spiritually to help matter, but also, I think the way we live our lives down here is going to inform how our spiritual practice takes place and how we show up. But using that two-way street to help enhance our lives, that is the vision. I'm so excited to have you take the ride with me, and I'm so excited to go a little deeper and create genius from a level greater than matter, but at the same time use matter to create even more genius and combine all of that to continue to make something amazing out of it. So thank you, and I will see you next time.